Hello everyone, today is Monday, October 19th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Beverage of choice today, just water, nothing too interesting. Today it's Monday, Menagerie Monday, bunch of topics, lots of activity happening over the weekend as always. So we'll hop right in. This morning, Secret Lair, one of the things they announced, they're partnering with Extra Life. So one of the things they're selling, I believe from what I've seen, I haven't actually seen it myself. I've just kind of been scrolling through social media. When I was writing this up earlier this morning, I couldn't actually find the link for it. I just don't know if it wasn't live at the time. But it seems to be that this item will be $60, and they'll be donating, I believe, $30 of it to Extra Life. Extra Life is a charity event. They usually partner with Twitch. It encourages people basically to get together, play games, stream games, whatever, and it benefits various children's hospitals. The one for Magic Gathering, the one for Secret Lair. They're partnering with, I believe, the Seattle Children's Hospital. So a percentage of all sales will go towards contributing, or will be made in donation towards the hospital. The Secret Lair itself is a little bit different. It does contain 4 cards, all foil. I did not see if there was a non-foil version. I believe this is a premium only version. The 4 cards contained inside, Consecrated Sphinx, Nefarious Protection, Collected Company, and Amulet of Vigor. All alternate art as usual. Secret Lair. The art on them is pretty cool. This is for a good cause. There's a lot of backlash on social media. Part of the complaint is that they're raising the price on the Secret Lairs. $60 is fairly steep, especially for 4 cards. It is important to note that the value of the Secret Lair at $60 at that price is actually a decent value if you are considering wanting to buy these cards. Right now, on the market, Consecrated Sphinx and Nefarious Protection are both right in about the $30 range. I think Consecrated Sphinx is a little bit less. Nefarious Protection is a little bit more. Both of those together are basically $60 themselves. You're getting the Amulet of Vigor and Collected Company for free. Those aren't terribly expensive, but they do have some amount of value themselves. Both of those hovering about $10. Collected Company, or not Collected Company, Amulet of Vigor has taken a bit of a hit with the recent reprint. So, just something to keep in mind. I think objectively, if you without counting the charity component of it with the Extra Life part of it, if you were to go out and spend these cards, if you were to go out and add these cards to your cart right now via any online store, you would be spending more than $60 for these 4 cards. Whether or not the foils, whether that's a big deal to you or not, is a slightly different issue. But again, if you want these cards, $60, objectively speaking, this is a good buy. I don't think it's a reasonable buy. Most of these cards are very, very good. Consecrated Sphinx, very, very common blue creature. It's a very good draw engine, gets very nutty in multiplayer games. Nefarious Protection, limited print. It was printed in a commander set. That sealed commander precon, if you want to buy it, is very, very expensive. I believe it is the Edgar Markov one, the Vampires one from a few years ago. Pretty expensive to buy it. Nefarious Protection is really the key card inside there. It has seen one reprint inside the mystery boosters. Mystery, that set, kind of, there are some issues with trying to crack it from there. So the value, pretty high. $60 is roughly is a good point if you want these cards you can use for all these cards, or even if you want to buy these and sell off the ones you don't use. Maybe you only want the Nefarious Protection, you can sell off the others. You can recuperate most of your costs, and you're basically getting a discount to Nefarious Protection. So I think it's a reasonable take. I think buying these cards, not the worst idea. There's a lot of backlash going on social media right now. Basically, people are saying that Wizards is raising the price for an item that should be a $30 to $40 item. They're basically raising the costs, and then using that justification to be donating the extra money to Extra Life, to charity, when they should basically are just doing it as a tax write-off. For those of you who aren't aware, charitable donations are a tax write-off. That's why we see a lot of big companies do things like this. when they are making that write-off, they're basically selling whenever they're making a charitable donation, they get to write off some amount of that against whatever they profit. Usually this is done for the sake of good publicity, right? In theory, they're doing a good thing. It is important to note that while this may be true, while it does seem like this is not entirely altruistic, a lot of the backlash that they're receiving, it is important to note this is something we've talked about before. Saffron Olive has mentioned this before in his post. We do have to remember fundamentally that at its core, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, they are corporations. Their goal is to make money. This is one of the means they can do so. By doing this, it does seem like they are instead passing the cost of the donation onto you, right? In theory, if this wasn't tied directly into a Secret Lair, right? If the Secret Lair just sold and these cards, they very could have easily sold it for $30, right? Instead, they bumped up the price to $60, and then those extra $30 they're getting from you, they're donating instead. Without going too deep into the ethics of that's kind of a separate discussion. Not really trying to get bogged down into it, as it were, with that component. If you're looking at this objectively, $60 is still a reasonable deal for these cards. Teferi's Protection, Consecrated Sphinx, those cards stay high. Those are obviously the big winners. Amulet Vigor and Collected Company. Collected Company has kind of fallen off in the sense that it doesn't see as much play in Modern as it did before. Right now, with competitive Magic and paper Magic kind of being in permanent standstill due to the pandemic, right? A lot of the competitive cards have kind of fallen by the wayside. So Commander cards will always continue to do well. I don't suspect that these will hugely impact the prices on these cards. If you own non-foil versions, if you own just regular versions of these cards, Teferi's Protection, Consecrated Sphinx, Amulet Vigor, Collected Company, I don't think it really impacts you. I don't think you need to go out and sell these. I think the nature of Secret Lair is that because they're released in relatively limited quantity, you're not really impacting the price in large capacity with them. So I think they're relatively safe. Even if you buy this for $60, these cards are going to remain relatively steady in value. I don't think, again, you're going to see a huge impact on them. So I think if you want these, if you want to play them, right, $60, it is ultimately going to a good cause. Maybe not in the way you think about it, that, you know, the whole 60 should be donated or whatever. Usually whenever these companies make donations, they have to cover their costs, right? It does cost some amount to produce these, obviously not $30 or whatever. So they technically are still profiting from this. At the end of the day, it is still $30 that's going to charity, that's going to Extra Life as a result, and $60 is still good value for those cards. Do what you will with that. That was something that was announced today. I didn't actually notice the date drop. I only listened to the announcement. I was only kind of half listening, so I kind of just got on the back end. I'm not sure when it's going to be dropped, but I imagine it's probably in the upcoming weeks or so. Moving onward, one of the other things that was discussed over the weekend that came out, apparently someone managed to get their hands onto some Commander Legends. If you've been following along, you've heard about Commander Legends. This isn't something that's supposed to be released for more than a month. How this person managed to acquire it is pretty interesting. According to their posts, they bought some off eBay, and the seller actually went and fulfilled their order. So I'm not really sure who the seller is, how the seller managed to get their hands on these packs, but this person had their order fulfilled. They opened up the packs, they posted the contents to their page. I don't really want to go into detail about spoilers. I know some people like to be kept in the dark. I don't really want to ruin that for anyone who cares about that. So I have looked at them. Jason Alt, when he was on with interview last week, he kind of mentioned in passing, right? We have seen some of the spoilers. We have seen some of the new cards being spoiled. Lots of new mechanics, lots of new things, lots of new planeswalkers, etc. Legendary creatures. So for the people that want to be kept in the dark, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. I do want to bring attention to some of the reprints, some of the things that they have announced. There are a lot of reprints in this set. A lot of them will be Commander-centric. No surprise. For those of you out there Commander Legends will be something that we'll continue to discuss as we have more spoilers coming out for them. For those of you out there who are invested heavily into Commander, who own personal decks, or are just looking to flip Commander cards, reprints are not necessarily a bad thing. Reprints, with their initial release, depending on how well the set will sell, I think that there may be an initial dip as it happens early, but it is important to note that, as with most of these cards, when people are wanting to buy them early, and we've seen how big the Commander market is, we've talked about this before, we've talked about how truly successful it is for a lot of stores to be stocking Commander products, to be selling Commander products, to be having a good Commander community. Commander cards, like these cards that will be reprinted, we've only seen a few. These cards will initially take a dip, but for the most part, the ones that are truly in demand, that are held up by actual gameplay versus scarcity, there are some cards that are expensive simply due to scarcity, right? Not surprised. There are cards that were reprinted, right, like 10, 15, 20 years ago or whatever, that are reprinting now, right? Usually in this case, we see a lot of them with Portal 3 Kingdoms cards. Those cards are simply expensive due to scarcity. But the ones that are truly playable usually will retain their value pretty well. We've seen Imperial Recruiter be reprinted. That card, obviously, a key piece in some Commander decks for the ones that play it, right? Loyal Retainers kind of in that same boat. The decks that do want to play it, they were fairly hamstrung before, because prior to their reprint, the only way you could get them was in Portal 3 Kingdoms, right? And if you want an English version, right, some of these cards, like hundreds of dollars for some of these cards, before a reprint existed. Reprint has come out, $825 for Imperial Recruiter. I believe there's a Masterpiece version. I'm not sure on Loyal Retainers, actually. It's been quite some time on that card. I believe it is a Commander's Arsenal version. I think there's one other version as well. Loyal Retainers, there's Portal 3 Kingdoms, Commander Arsenal, and Masterpiece version. So these have come down quite a bit. Same case with Imperial Recruiter. Both of them have come down off of their high, as it were, when only Portal 3 Kingdoms printing existed. Double Masters, Masters 25, and Judge Promo. So Imperial Recruiter has gone down a little bit as a result of the Double Masters reprint, but it is important to note that this card still sees plenty of play. This isn't really that much lower than what it had existed before. Prior to the Double Masters print existing, when it was only an A25, this card was hovering around, I want to say, like $30 or so dollars, $25 to $30. So that price is more indicative of what the card would be if the supply weren't completely crushed on the card. The original Portal 3 Kingdoms version is still well over $100. There's a point when these cards, when the Imperial Recruiter was like, I think close to like $250 to $300. It was a very, very difficult card to sell, mainly because it was so expensive for what was perceived to be an uncommon. It did see some narrow play in Legacy, but it was really, really hard to sell that card as a vendor. There were just a very, very small group of people that actually wanted it. Once the Masters 25 version came out, it was much more accessible to people, and there was actual demand on this card. This is a card that has remained relatively consistent in price through its lifetime. Even the Double Masters reprint, I see that on TCG, want to go out and buy this card, it's about $16, $17 and change, what have you, depending on who you're wanting to buy it from. So there's clearly demand for these cards. These cards do sell. Imperial Recruiter, there is demand for it. This is one of the cards where the price before, the $250 to $300 price, clearly an unreasonable price. That's not something that people would buy. Vendors would have the card and they would just sit and sit and sit. Maybe you find that one person at Blue Moon that wants to build Legacy deck and they would buy that one off of you that you had. But this card is very, very hard to sell after it got reprinted, right? Clearly still demand, clearly still people are buying it. The old version has gone down some in price. There's still people who want the old version that are playing it. There will always be people who want the original printings instead of the master reprints. But these cards will continue to sell. So in the case of reprints, Imperial Recruiter, pretty extreme example, but the reprints, the cards that are good, the cards that are actually played, will continue to sell. Those cards are likely the best cards to buy during release weekend, towards the beginning, when supply on the set is the highest, because those cards generally rebound very quickly. You have a lot of Commander players out there who are waiting for a reprint to come for some of the cards to drop in price. And then when that price drop happens, people tend to snap those up very quickly. You want to be buying those cards again towards the beginning of when the set drops, usually on the Friday, Saturday, when people are listing very, very large volumes. The sellers are listing these cards in mass. They're opening product in mass, and they're trying to sell them as quickly as possible. You have a huge supply entering the market, and sellers, usually the top sellers, are trying to undercut each other. They're trying to make sure that they get their copies out and sold as quickly as possible. Those are sellers that you want to be buying from right away at the beginning of the weekend. And then as the supply starts to drop, as those cheap copies start to slowly disappear, these cards will be rebound very quickly. That being said, it is important to note that the cards are held up by scarcity, the cards that exist in very, very low supply. Some of those cards are likely to be crushed, right? We're never going to see a $300 Imperial Recruiter again. That's just not going to be the case. There's no scenario in the world where the original version of the Imperial Recruiter will go back up from its $125, $130 to $250, $300. Those days are just completely gone. So it is important to note that if you're holding on to cards that are expensive because they're scarce, you may want to consider selling them sooner rather than later, because any card that does get hit by a reprint, if it's based on scarcity alone, those cards are basically just never going to recover in value. That being said, I think the reprints may possibly be good buys if it's important to remember this, if they are actually playable. If the card is expensive simply because it's rare and it gets reprinted, the card will never be worth anything again. Your best cards that continue to see play, that people do want, those cards are relatively insulated from being reprints. A really good example of this, Craterhoof Behemoth. It was in Jumpstart. It actually did nothing to price. Granted, Jumpstart law supply issues. A lot of people are still having problems getting Jumpstart out there. Stores still having problems ordering it. Waves have come very, very sporadically. Europe reported only getting their Jumpstart wave, I think, in this past week or so. It was a relatively recent thing. So supply and Jumpstart very, very constrained, but Craterhoof Behemoth, that card sees plenty of play in green EDH decks. It is really kind of the go-to finisher. That card has remained completely stable in price. It's actually gone up steadily instead of going down. This card is completely stable in price. There's still a lot of demand for this card. And that's just one example of a card where the reprint hasn't really done much to the value of the card. Initially, I think there was some small drop in the price as more and more copies were being listed, and the Avacyn Restored and Modern Masters one, people tried to undercut to sell off their copies. But again, because this card is playable, this card is highly playable, it's very, very sought after by green EDH players, this card has actually done nothing but go up. It's steady, but this is an instance where I think the card is relatively insulated from value. I think Commander Legends, by reprinting all these cards, getting them out there on the market, is a good thing. Commander players, again, when there's these cards that are entering the market, new cards, reprints, whatever, all it's doing is incentivizing Commander players to go out and build new decks, to try new decks, and as a result, that's going to help you sell a lot more cards. So if you're wanting to hold these cards for long term, I think that's perfectly viable as well. I definitely do plan on picking up some of these cards in very, very large quantities and just holding them. I think just the nature of Commander, because people who play Commander just inherently don't take their cards and churn through them at the same rate that competitive players do. A lot of these cards, people buy them, people hold on to them, and then there's not really more supply that enters the system. As a result, these cards, once they get bought, they generally just kind of disappear. And until more product gets opened by vendors, or until we have some avenue in the distant future, what have you, where it's safe to go out, start having events again, where vendors are able to buy cards and get cards circulating back into the economy, a lot of these prices, I think, are going to be relatively insulated, and I think holding on to some Commander Legends singles will do well for the future. Kind of back to spoilers, without actually going to spoilers, I don't really want to talk about new cards. One of the things that we saw was Sol Ring was in there. And it's important to note that Sol Ring has an extended art. That was one of the cards that was spoiled inside this post. You can see that it is a Sol Ring. It's just kind of the same art that's been in Commander sets. Recycled art, but it's extended now, so the art goes all the way out to a frame. This was one of the cards that they showed. It is important to note, because I mentioned this before, this is another premium variant on Sol Ring. Sol Ring is really kind of the go-to card for every Commander deck. That's probably about as evergreen a card as can exist in Commander, in the sense that it goes perfectly in every deck. It's very powerful. Every deck wants it. There's no deck out there that doesn't benefit from Sol Ring in some capacity. This is another premium version of this card, and what this is going to do for those people who are holding on to other Sol Rings or whatever is, if you have any intention of selling your Sol Ring in the future, assuming you have a premium version, and what do I mean by premium version, is something beyond just your basic non-foil Sol Ring, right? If you just want basic non-foil Sol Ring to play with, you have 10 EDH decks, you want to go and buy 10, right? You're most likely just going to turn to one of the Commander variants. This card is in every Commander deck that's been printed since Commander decks have existed in 2011. There's just so many versions of these basic Sol Rings out there. For the people who want premium Sol Rings, right, you have a bunch of choices. You have Alpha, Beta if you want the old versions. Even unlimited Sol Rings are worth a decent amount now because people like the old art frame, right? We have the masterpieces, the masterpiece from Kaladesh. We have the original Judge Foil. We have the From the Vault Relics, which is the Sol Ring with the current art. It's just in the full frame with the From the Vault foiling. We have a Commander Collection green, the Sol Ring, right? This is coming on December. This is a new product that has kind of a green Sol Ring in it, as it were. That's another version that's coming out because it does have the premium version. We have the Magic Fest Sol Rings that were given out to people who signed up for Command Fest. You have the non-foil and foil versions of those. And then you have, what am I missing? I think there's one more Sol Ring I'm missing here. The Judge Sol Ring as well. These are all examples of Sol Rings that are out there that would be considered premium versions. And I mentioned this as an issue because as more and more of these premium Sol Rings get released, right, we'll have an extended art copy that you can get presumably in foil. And then when the Commander Legend copy drops in December as well, right, these are two more versions of what can be interpreted as premium Sol Rings that are being added to the market. And all this does is make it increasingly more difficult to sell any single premium variant of Sol Ring, right? If you think about it in the context of basic lands, the majority of the decks plays basic lands. A lot of people own basic lands that they like, and this is one of the topics that comes up frequently, is what is your preferred art for basic lands? And there's a ton of choices out there. People like different arts. There's a lot of cool variants. Right, we have your classic Alpha Beta. I prefer Beta myself, just kind of the old, truly vintage look. You have the Beta arts, right? If I want to play basic lands, I could just go into a draft box in my store, grab some lands out there, and play with those if you don't really care, right? Some people just don't care at all. You have Unhinged, Unglued, you have foil lands, you have promo lands, right? There's just tons and tons of different lands out there for whatever your flavor is. As a result, it makes selling any individual copy of basic lands more and more difficult. Having done a lot of events, I know that people have asked for the full spread of lands. People have asked for very specific sets, right? Someone was wanting like 20 of each foil 7th edition basic land for their set, for their cube one time, or however many. I think it was more than that. I was like, that's very, very narrow. That's a very, very specific one. And he was wanting the same matching art for his cube as well. I was like, one, that's going to be a very expensive project. And two, it's going to be hard to buy them in large capacity all at one sitting. And he said that, yeah, he's been fully aware of this. He goes to every vendor. He just asks around. And realistically, most vendors don't really have more than one or two at a time if they have any at all. right? People have asked for just the full range of basics. It becomes very, very hard to stock basics because in order for you to stock basics, in order for you to sell them, right, you need quantity, right? These people who want basics, they're not trying to buy 1 or 2 basics unless their deck only plays 1 or 2 of these premium basics. People are usually wanting 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 basics for their cube, for their draft set, what have you. As such, it makes it more difficult to sell each individual version of basic lands. Sol Ring is largely going to become the same way. With so many Sol Rings on the market, with so many Sol Rings available, if you're trying to sell a beta Sol Ring, right, you now have to remember that you're competing against someone out there who wants a premium version of a Sol Ring, is going to be thinking, I have choices. Maybe I should get, if I want foil one, right, I have Kaladesh, I have the Commander Legends Green, I have the Magic Fest one, Judge promo, all these versions. If I want a non-foil one, I can get Commander Legends Green in non-foil. I can get this extended art in non-foil. I can get the Alpha Beta one. I can get a limited one, what have you. So it makes it's watering down the demand for each individual card and makes it harder to sell each individual version of these cards because demand is now being spread, instead of people previously, once upon a time, only having a choice where between, Alpha Beta Unlimited, Masterpiece, Judge from the vault. Now you have more and more choices are being added each year, and makes it more and more difficult to sell these cards. I think one of the cards I saw in the spoiler as well, Xenagos, or Xenagod rather, Xenagos, God of Revels, the red-green one from Born of the Gods. There's a full art version of that with, it looks a little bit different. I think it's like extended art. I didn't look at that carefully. Same idea. There's the original version, the one that people really like. People will always be attracted to original version, right? So foils on that, because it is Commander, because it is a foil. That's foil legends are the cards that generally sell the easiest, because people usually, if there's one card they're going to foil in their deck, it's going to be their Commander. It's kind of one of those things where if you have to look at all the time, you kind of want it to be extra special. So the foils on that do have a premium, but we do have to remember it was in a Secret Lair, right? We had the Theros Stargazing at one point. That was a Secret Lair that sold a little bit earlier this year. So that's another foil version. And now we have the extended art versions of the Xenagos as well. And again, all this is doing is it's diverting attention away from the other ones. It is still likely that the Born of the Gods original print will be the most expensive, because people like original foils. That's kind of like, that's meant to go to for a long time. A lot of the original foils do hold a large premium. But there may be someone out there who looks at the original Born of the Gods foil and just thinks, well, this is kind of cool. It is original, but for presumably a fraction of the price or whatever, I could just go buy this new full art foil one that will be much easier to get. It'll be new, so it's likely to be in better condition. And I'm okay getting that versus spending the premium on the old one. So with all these additions, all these things, it just makes it harder and harder to sell each individual premium version of a card. And as a result, it's becoming harder and harder to capture a larger portion of the market if you hold some of these premium cards, because now there's more directions for people to be pulled in. And I would argue that a lot of people who are thinking about offloading their collections, offloading, a lot of people have foil cubes, full EDH decks, big things that they're looking to hold. I think that given the direction that Wizards has taken with these cards, with how they're reprinting cards, with how they're changing card frames, what have you, these cards are going to become more and more difficult to sell as time goes on, because their liquidity goes down. With more and more premium versions being present, we've established that with the list, with Zendikar Rising set boosters, they've shown that they're okay printing cards from the list. So Brazen Borrower, right, the version that's being reprinted is the showcase one from Throne of Eldraine collector boosters, right? In theory, if those cards aren't safe, right, if this is something that can potentially be reprinted, right, I don't really see anything that's being safe. It is interesting to note that masterpieces, a lot of the original masterpieces from Battle for Zendikar, Oath of Gatewatch, Kaladesh, the original masterpieces, not the new box covers that they have nowadays, but a lot of those have slowly crept up in value, which I find interesting, because even though supply has steadily been dwindling on the market, all I see is these cards becoming harder and harder and harder to sell as there are more versions released. Some of these versions may not be released right away. It may be worth holding on to some of them, but I have, for example, Masterpiece Soul Rings listed on TCG Player. I see more and more people trying to list them. I see the same copies whenever I try to reprice these cards. I see the same people selling them. So either these copies are just very, very slow to move, or people aren't willing to be paying the premium price that the market dictates that they should go for. And when these cards become hard to sell, it just makes them less, in my mind, I don't want to be holding on to them, because with them becoming hard to sell, they become less liquid. Less liquid means it's hard to turn these over for cash when you do need them. And part of the nature of investing, part of the nature of assets, is how liquid are your assets. It's great if you own something that is very, very expensive, but if it's something that's hard to sell, then you're going to be in a really, really difficult position, because a lot of things that, and generally as become more expensive, they become more difficult to sell. And now if you're talking about something that is expensive and it appeals to a very, very small market, that to me, that sounds like something I want to get rid of as quickly as possible. Masterpieces, I think, are kind of in that high risk category. I think now with the price rising, it is probably about as good a time to ever to get out of them. Because I think all you're doing by risking holding on to them is you're just going to have another cooler variant of your masterpiece come out somewhere down the line, because Wizards wants to reprint a master set, and if they reprint a master set, right, you're going to have a premium version, a collector booster or something, and it's going to get the full art treatment, right, full art treatment, all these variations, and that's just going to hurt you down the line when you do try and sell them. So I think just kind of in anticipation of Commander Legends, just to kind of get a bit ahead of it, is you want these cards to be selling as quickly as possible. You just want to get out of them. In my mind, that's what I want to do, rather than hold on to them and just try and ride it out. Because again, as I mentioned, a lot of these cards are going up in value because supply is steadily dwindling on them, right? No one's opening up Battle for Zendikar booster packs anymore. No one's opening up Oath of Gatewatch booster packs anymore. No one's opening up Ultimate Masters boxes anymore for box toppers, right? These cards, as they dwindle in supply, they will slowly go up in value. But as they go up in value, I think they'll just slowly become incrementally hard to sell. And this is the point where I think it's worth getting out. So it's just kind of wrapping up my thoughts on Commander Legends. For the people out there, spoilers do start next Monday. I think officially they start on October 26th. I believe the set releases on November 20th, 1 month from tomorrow. It may have changed, but don't hold me to that. But I think that is the case. So this is something to be aware of. Again, if you are holding on to a powered cube that's fully foiled, you have full masterpieces, expeditions, box toppers, what have you, I would consider downgrading some of those. If you care about a foil version, if you care about premium version, it's likely that there will be another version down the line. If you are considering selling those, again, I would maybe consider taking those out, selling them now rather than later, kind of getting ahead of what's going to happen with Commander Legends. And as more spoilers come out, because again, there will be new cards, but I think the biggest focus, the majority of this excitement about Commander Legends will be on the cards that do get reprinted. Cards that do get reprinted, cards that kind of are out of the realm of accessibility for most players, and this kind of gets them back to their hands. I think that will be the focus on it, and I think with the focus on reprints, right, people will be looking also at what premium versions can I buy, what cooler versions can I buy that I could possibly upgrade. Just something to consider, and I'll kind of wrap up our talk about Commander Legends. Moving onwards, Pokemon still continues to do well. Kind of the biggest movement over the past weekend was XY Evolutions. This was one of the cards that came in the XY series. The set dropped in November 2016. This was 4 months after Pokemon Go dropped. For those of you who kind of remember, that summer of 2016, July was when Pokemon Go came out. That was kind of the summer of Pokemon Go. And there were people just kind of going out, walking around, just playing Pokemon Go all the time. That was what really kind of brought all the craze back into Pokemon. That was what kind of got a lot of people back, right? A lot of people just picked up Pokemon Go, and they started to reconsider trying to go back, dig out their old cards and seeing where they are. That was the beginning of it. November 2016, that was when Evolutions dropped. This is all kind of in celebration of the 20th anniversary of Pokemon. 2016 was the 20th anniversary. The set Pokemon was originally released in Japan in 1996. So that whole year, just kind of a celebration of the 20th anniversary. Evolutions was kind of the version that was printed in the US. Japan is a slightly different variation on the 20th anniversary product, but XY Evolutions, that was a product that dropped. It was really a throwback to kind of the original base set, right? So some of the cards they've updated. So Charizard actually has the same art. The XY Evolutions Charizard has the same art. It just has slightly upgraded abilities, just more in accordance with what that card would look like if it were reprinted today. It does have the original art, and I think there's a lot of things in there that people just look back on and just think in terms of nostalgia. EV on the pack is not very, very high. A lot of singles have started to climb in price, but over the weekend, the biggest jump in price was the sealed packs. So sealed packs, elite trainer boxes, and booster boxes all exploded in price over the weekend. This is probably kind of in anticipation of what happened with how much base set Charizards have gone up, right? We've seen a lot of publicity with Logic, with Logan Paul, with what they've done to the market for Pokemon products with really the base set stuff, first edition Charizards. So there's been a lot of excitement about that. There's been a lot of buzz. A lot of people are really starting to really evaluate their Pokemon collections and then going back and looking at them and thinking, man, I should go check out my old stuff, try and dig it up, see what there is. And I see all these posts, a lot of posts on Facebook, a lot of posts on social media. I have friends who aren't in the industry at all. They don't care about the hobby. They've just gone back and are finding their cards. And I just see posts where, man, I went back and found old Pokemon cards. This is becoming something that's becoming the norm. People that I would not have imagined them being someone who collected Pokemon cards at any point in their life are all of a sudden finding Pokemon cards now. Hey David, what's going on? David says Evolution Zard is way too high right now and sold your boxes for $450 yesterday. Yeah, so when this product came out in 2016, this was something you could just buy, right? You could buy them $90 to $100 for a booster box. These have been steady at basically $100, $120 for a very, very long time. And then, like David mentioned, they just kind of popped over the weekend. He sold his boxes for $450. $450 is actually on the cheaper side of things. If you go on eBay, you look at eBay completed, you look at some sold listings on TCG Player. A lot of boxes are actually over $500 to $600 now. Whether or not people are paying for them or basically just chill bidding or whatever, I'm not completely sure, but it does show that there's a lot of movement on these. People are going out and buying them before they miss out, and this was one of the things I discussed last weekend. When I said, when you think about what do we buy next, you always want to be thinking about the next best thing, right? People can't go out and buy first edition Charizards anymore. People can't go out and buy base set Charizards anymore unless you have a few thousand to spend minimum. So now what are people doing? People are buying Evolutions Charizards because it looks exactly the same. The art is exactly the same. People want nostalgia. People want the collectability factor. People that want the cool factor. You can just go back and buy. You can go back and buy the Evolutions Charizards, which is something I said. Now they've really exploded in price. So this is, again, people buying the next best thing. You have to be thinking about what you can buy next in anticipation of what's happening in the market, in anticipation of how it's going to change. So XY Evolutions has done very well. And this is something for those of you who aren't fully aware in Pokemon, who don't have the full context of it. XY Evolutions is probably one of the most heavily printed sets in recent history, especially in the context of that era. We have to remember this was printed in November 2016. This is post Pokemon Go. There was a lot of people getting back into Pokemon at this time. 2016, this was kind of the beginning of the first boom cycle for Pokemon. A lot of cards had exploded in price at this time. This was kind of when we saw prices kind of take a jump forward from where they were. Probably prices increased more in this time than they had in the past 6 years or so prior to that. From 2010 to 2016, most prices were relatively stagnant, relatively stayed the same. But in the year after that, people started, this was their first for into people going out and buying sealed product. A lot of the product that people bought back then, again, just kind of people wanting to go back and catch up on their old product. Not unlike what we see today. This was people just going out, buying, and just rebuying the old cards, and it caused a huge price jump. Now, Evolutions, right, we look where it's at. There are so many Evolutions packs out there that you could buy them probably up until 2018. I want to say probably 2018, early 2019. You could still be buying Evolutions packs inside sealed product. I have some product here, for example. So we've talked about before, this is a premium collection box. So for people who haven't seen them, this is what they look like. This is kind of something that you get in a big box store, Target, Walmart, what have you. I bought these at Costco earlier this year. So I've mentioned this before, one of the reasons that Pokemon does so well is because they sell these big boxy products. Inside there's only 6 booster packs, so you can kind of see there's 3 on this side, 3 on this side. This box does contain 1 Evolutions pack in here. But in the context of a parent who's trying to get their kids into Pokemon, so game stores generally do very well with these things because it looks very impressive, right? Like, again, if I hold the box back, this is a pretty big box. It is mostly air. There's a lot of plastic inside. There is not a lot of actual content. There's 2 promo cards, 1 extra oversized card, 6 packs, a pin, and a coin. That's it. If you were to pack this more efficiently, you could probably pack this in something, with the exception of the oversized card, in something that looks probably not too different than what the Commander decks look like for Magic. But from a parent's perspective, this is an awesome product because it's big, it's boxy, it looks visually impressive. Pokemon actually sells premium collections that are even bigger than this. There's probably some that are probably about like this high. That just they obviously contain more packs. There's a little bit more meat to them, but from a parent's perspective, this is something, from a store perspective rather, this is something that sells decently well. If you have the walkthrough, if you have a lot of foot traffic, if you have people that come in and shop inside your store and they see this is a good way to get people into Pokemon, especially if they don't know exactly what they're trying to buy. It's much easier to sell a parent and tell them that you want to sell this for $30 as opposed to trying to sell them, a single card that's worth $30, even though this is the best card in the set, and they're not likely to pull $30 of stuff out of this. But selling these to parents, very, very easy. So that's why I think this is one of the things that Pokemon does very well in terms of the product. So I actually bought these from Costco earlier this year. They had these in store. I just bought everything that was there because it seemed way too cheap at the time. So it comes like this. There's a slightly different box product. So they actually had wrapped 2 of these together. I don't know if this was done via third party, but they wrapped these together. There's 2 boxes together. This was $30 for both of these. It's $15 per box. If you look at these, inside this there is one. Looks like there's only 1 Evolutions pack inside. So if each one of these boxes is $15, these Evolutions packs are about $10 a pack. If you basically take that out, the whole box that you can get here, you're basically getting 5 extra packs, oversized card, promo cards for like $5. And these actually sell on TCG. Most of these are in like anywhere from like the $30 to like $50 range. Again, kind of a hard sell. They sell slowly. I do have some of these listed, but they do sell. They sell slowly, but the value is definitely there. And again, that just goes to show Evolution's product has done really well. Even though there's a lot of it printed out there, people are still buying these because even though we have seen it being reprinted in some capacity in some of these old boxes, you can still buy. I don't know if these are still at Costco. I bought these like 6 months ago or something. It just goes to show that there is a lot of demand for these cards. People will still buy sealed packs of these because people like to open packs more so in Pokemon than probably anything else. David, let's see. You have some comments right here. I'm selling Evolutions in hype and getting out without looking back. It's insane. All Ultras from old Nintendo have been climbing too. Those are arrows I would be looking at. I think you're definitely right. I think if you have them, you're more than happy to sell out. I think that the nature of the collectible industry, kind of this hobby, is that if you've done well with collectibles, whenever you see the things jump in price, it's probably a good time to get out on them, especially if you've held on to them for a long time
It's easy to sell because you've made your money. You may as well lock that money in, get out, and just move that money to something else. There's always another opportunity out there. Money, there's always an opportunity for you to buy if you have money in place. And that's kind of the value of having liquid assets. That's why you want things that you can turn over easily, you can sell easily. Because a lot of things, again, realistically, if you're stuck with something that is difficult to sell, even if it's expensive, you're going to always get less value than what you think, because you may be in a position where, well, I haven't really had anyone bite on this. I've had it on sale for a year or something. No one bites. So if you get out of it right away, right, you can just move on and buy something else. Buy whatever the next thing is. And like David mentioned, I think ultras from old Nintendo have been climbing. Like, these are old era, these are WotC era cards, right? A lot of them haven't really seen the same price spikes, haven't seen as much activity, haven't seen as much action, because they're not actively in the limelight. And buying into the limelight, buying into the hype, buying things that are already expensive just doesn't make sense. You want to be looking at what is the next best thing. And I keep reiterating this because people are always getting caught up in what they see in front of them, what they see right now. And if you really want to get ahead in terms of investing, if you want to be getting the most bang for your buck, you need to be thinking about what you should be buying next, rather than stressing about opportunities you already missed. Evolutions, this is just one example. I think there's a lot more to be had going forward with Pokemon. Again, Evolutions is just kind of the next victim in things that have gone expensive because a lot of attention has been drawn to them. If you look on Facebook groups right now, if you look on eBay, there is actually a lot of people trying to sell their product, and the fact that they're getting bites means that there's actual demand for this. There's actually people wanting to be buying this product, because a lot of collectors out there, for people who want to be collecting, if they want one of every booster box in the modern era, for example, or they want one of every elite trainer box, right? These are all things that have jumped in price. They're already getting expensive. So lock in your opportunity. If you have Evolutions boxes, I'm going to be listing a ton of these products in the probably very near future. If you have these, be happy with what you made and move on. Even if you have to undercut, even if you have to sell a little bit cheaper, leave the extra 10% for the next guy, make it his problem, and just use your money, recycle, and move on to something else. So that's my advice. That's kind of the talk about Pokemon. That's kind of the big thing that's happening right now is Pokemon. We do have to see how this PWCC cycle with the new auction lot, with a lot of cards being dropped on there. We'll have to see how the price holds for some of the old Premier WotC era stuff. There's a lot of WotC stuff that is on the auction cycle. It's all graded cards. So we'll have to kind of see if the market is reacting. If the market does show that these prices are real, if there's people buying up at these high prices, all that means is that there's real demand. And I think this is a good place to be. If you're in Pokemon, I don't think there's a better time to get in right now versus later. I've mentioned this time and time again. The 25th anniversary is next year, right? 2021, 25 years for Pokemon. If Nintendo is going to do as well as they think they are, and I think if they have the right idea in mind, if they're able to market this, if they're able to just smash out of the park and make Pokemon a big deal, I think that these prices are basically here to stay permanently. A lot of the people that are trying to get in now, they're just going to become diehard collectors, right? If they like it enough, if they're benefiting from the market going up this much in price, you're going to have collectors for life. And that's really how Pokemon starts. And with next year, with the 20th anniversary, if more people are going to get back into Pokemon again, if more people go back and are going to dig up old collections, dig up their old cards, all it's going to do is just bring more and more people into the game. There's more demand for the game, right? This is something that will continue to grow, continue to evolve the game. No pun intended there. And in the long run, it's better for collectors, it's better for investors, it's better for players, it's better for Pokemon, it's better for everyone. So I think if you're willing to buy, I know I sound like a broken record player by just repeating this. You want to be in the market as much as possible. Timing the market is always going to be worse than time in the market. The longer you are in the market, the more you'll be rewarded. I bought these boxes probably about 6 months ago. I want to say I bought them in April. I've just kind of threw them in my closet, forgot about them, and like they're already starting to pay off. It's ridiculous. And this is only 6 months. What happens in a year from now? What happens in 2 years from now? right? What happens in 5 years from now when we're kind of looking back at all this, and then we're in anticipation of Pokemon for a 30th anniversary, right? These things are going to become more unobtainable than they are today. And I think that the more you put into a market right now, the more you're buying, the more you're holding on to. If you can afford to do so, all you're going to do is it's going to reward you in the long term if you're able to hold on to it. So I know this seems kind of counterproductive to what I said before. I said you should be selling, and I do think that you should sell anything that you've made money on and you don't need it, and the money could be better spent elsewhere. You should sell, lock in your profits, right? If your investment had a good return on it, sell out, get out of that investment, and put it into your next investment. That's how people build wealth. That's how a lot of investors do well for themselves. That's how people in their in their retirement life do well. If you ask a lot of very successful people, they've had a chance to invest over the course of their life. They've held on to their investments. Their investments have paid off. They've put their investments into something else. This is how you build wealth. And I think while this may be a somewhat foreign concept to a lot of people, a lot of younger people nowadays, a lot of people who are getting into market as investors, as people who are getting into the collectible market, right? I think there is some component of collectability, right? Some people do appreciate the nostalgia. Some people do have the joy in this. But again, I think there's a lot of people out there who look at this as investing, as holding on to things long term, as being able to get returns on their hobby. And even if you're just looking to make the hobby cheaper for yourself, finding these opportunities where you can buy smartly, get the most out of your money, and then get ahead in the future is how you're going to do well in the long run. And I think that, again, now is probably as good a time as ever. If you can identify what that next best thing is, what you should be buying next, and then holding on through it from now, probably in the next 6 months or the year, right? Ride out the 20th anniversary, see how Pokemon goes. I think there's a potential big payday for a lot of people in the near future. While we're kind of on the topic of PWCC, one of the things that they had released that they discussed in their most recent cycle is that you had a lot of cards that have hit record numbers in the past auction cycle. That means that the collectible industry is alive and well with sports cards, especially. Last month, just kind of to summarize some of the biggest things that they reported in their sales article. A PSA 8 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. This sold for $428,000. I've discussed this in one of my past episodes. This is something that, again, people have to remember in the context of collectibles. Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, right? We think that these are fairly big. Pokemon is obviously the biggest of those. Completely pales in the context of sports. The amount of people that collect sports cards, the amount of people that buy sports cards, the value of licenses that some of these card companies have with Major League Baseball, basketball, football, completely overshadows Pokemon, Magic, some of our more traditional collectibles. Sports cards will always do well. Sports cards are going for more and more than they ever have before. PSA 8 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, right? $428,000. BGS 8 2000 Tom Brady playoff contenders card, right? This is one of his rookie cards, right? $205,000. This is also a record sale. BGS 9.5 2017 Panini Prism Patrick Mahomes, $55,000. This is a card that was printed 3 years ago. Granted, Patrick Mahomes has done very well. He's had the numbers to back it up. He's probably one of the highest paid players in the NFL right now. So that's not really a surprise, but this is something that was printed 3 years ago. This is a very, very recent card, and we can see how much it's gone up now. The next example, PSA 10 2018 Panini Prism Trae Young, $41,000, almost $42,000 in the PWCC batch. This is how big sports cards are. Again, I think that for those of you out there who like to gamble, maybe look at sports betting. If you think you know sports, if you think you are fairly savvy, if you can identify who the dark horses are, and you can get ahead of the market on rookie cards, try to speculate, trying to bet big on some players, it's very, very easy to have a payoff. Over the weekend, we had we know who's playing the World Series now. I mentioned this last Friday before we knew the conclusion. right? The Tampa Bay Rays, this is their second World Series appearance. If they win this, if they spike this, we talked this unlikely before. They had only had a 25% chance, assuming equal odds before. Now they're at 50% chance to win the World Series. And this is going to be something that is going to be a big deal for people who buy, for fans of the Tampa Bay Rays, people who want to bet on their sports cards, bet on rookie cards, right? This is, if they win, this is going to be a big deal for a lot of those people. And I mentioned this last week. I imagine some of these cards have already gone up in anticipation of this, especially considering how much of an underdog the Rays were to the Astros. But again, this is an opportunity. If you want to bet, if you're a betting person, if you're already betting in sports, if you're already doing sports betting, maybe consider taking some of that sports betting money and try and ride it into sports cards. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. It is a gamble. I think if you have to have a fairly good sense, your intuition has to be pretty good. You have to have a good sense of, you have the ability to follow up on sports very well. You have to be able to keep up with players, with news. But I think the people that do sports betting, I think they're foolish to do so. If they're willing to bet on players if you're willing to bet on the outcome of a match, if you think whatever outcome is going to happen, you should be buying those rookies, those sports cards, and squirreling them away. Because again, we look at 2017, we look at 2018, there's not many cards. If you think about our hobbies, if you think about things like Pokemon and Magic, there's not many cards where you could potentially be getting $55,000 for, $41,000 for in cards that have been printed in the past 3 years. And that really goes to show, again, how big sports cards is. Sports cards is something that I've been getting more into. I've been trying to learn about sports cards as much as I can, because it's hard to... It's hard because I don't follow sports as well as I should. I think that if I did more, I'd be more aggressive about this, but it's something that I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to get caught up on, because again, I think there's a good opportunity to make money there. I think if you go deep, if you are intimately familiar with your sports of choice, right, basketball, football, baseball, soccer, what have you, right, there's so many sports out there, there's tons of sports cards. A lot of these companies that put them out, they put out a lot of products, so there's always going to be something that you will do well with. Not everything is going to be a win, right? The sports cards industry it requires a lot of hedging, it requires a lot of know. I'm not saying it's easy. There's a lot of people that deal in sports cards. A lot of sports card stores constantly go under just because they can't keep up with the times. But if you're savvy, if you know what you're doing, if you can keep up with sports cards, if you can keep up with what's happening in sports, you will do well for yourself. And it sounds like I'm hyping a lot of this up, but this is what's happening in the market right now. PWCC wouldn't report on this if they didn't have record breaking auctions on some of these bigger high-end cards. And a lot of people, again, seem to think that, okay, well, I mean, how much, like, realistically can your average person be able to afford $55,000 sports cards or $200,000 sports cards? And yes, that's true. Your average person probably would rather own a house than a $200,000 sports card or $400,000 sports cards. But what that means is that when money enters the market, this is the same principle that applies to Pokemon, this is the same principle that applies to collectibles across the board. When more money enters the market, when there's more eyes on it, when there's more publicity on it, when these things become your everyday news, when these things are big deals, all that means is that it will slowly trickle down. Sports cards that are kind of a lower tier, right? There's a lot of opportunities for people out there to get sports cards that you can buy for several $100s that could well be worth 4 digits in not too long. It doesn't require that much of a break, right? Sometimes players have to be able to get a little lucky. Sometimes they have to have a standout season. Some of these players, have to go on and win a championship or whatever. But it doesn't take much for that to happen. And if you, again, are betting in sports, if you watch sports, if you follow sports, if you're a fan of your team, if you think that they're going to have a breakout year, if you think a player's going to break out, it's worth putting your time into the market. It's worth putting your time into the market. It's worth putting your money into the market and trying to stay ahead of the curve. Because again, 3 years, this isn't long, right? Pokemon Evolutions, 2016, 4 years. This isn't that long. We're not talking about buying things 20 years ago and then trying to like hold them on for 20 years, or buying things now and waiting 20 years to see return. 3 years, 4 years, and you're starting to see these kinds of returns. This is completely smashing traditional investment means. This is completely beating the market. This is beating inflation. People who are doing this right now, this is an opportunity to get very, very far ahead in the future. And if this is something that you're already doing in terms of your hobby, right? You have people who are already playing Pokemon, already collecting Pokemon. You have people who are playing Magic, already collecting Magic. You have people that watch sports, that read about sports, that do sports betting. Why not take the next jump, put some of that money aside instead of trying to gamble it away on opening up booster packs or what have you? Put some of that aside, buy cards that are already known, right? Cards that you think will do well, right? Pokemon, buy sealed product you think will do well, buy the next thing and set aside. And in as little as 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right? We could already see this turn around. And I think that is one of the core principles of investing in the collectible industry that most people just aren't catching on to and warming up to quickly enough. So that's PWCC. That was kind of their news. As I mentioned before, time and time again, there's no reason for the collectible industry to be slowing down in any capacity. I have a lot of faith in sports cards. I have a lot of faith in Pokemon. A little less faith in Magic. We've kind of talked about that before. But I think collectibles are here to stay. It's no surprise that they're doing as well as they are, and I don't think that there's any reason for that buzz to slow down. I think it's just going to continue to pick up speed as more and more people get in, as more and more people show interest, as more and more people are willing to put their money into this. And at the end of the day, that's how investing pays off. So that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you all for listening. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Thank you all for listening. As always, we'll be back here tomorrow. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe. Thanks again.